Well, there's this very popular meme out on the internet, and it's a meme which takes all of these different gods and compares them to Jesus and shows that all of these gods have the exact same story as Jesus. And so they'll list maybe like 6, maybe 12 things that are similar to the story of Jesus. But is this actually what's true? If we start looking at these gods like Mithras and Horus and Osiris, do we actually see that these gods have the same story? Well, you know, if you encounter this meme, you might say like, wow, it looks like they do have the same story. I've had people tell me that they left the faith when they saw this. What should we do when we encounter this? Well, I usually give 3 steps. First of all, we need to get the whole story. That's the first step. So when you look at, let's just say Horus and Jesus, you know, Bill Maher, the political comedian, said that Horus has the exact same story as Jesus, or I believe he actually said Jesus is an exact copy of Horus. Let's actually go and find the source material for Horus and Jesus. Because what happens most of the time is you're reading secondary, tertiary sources. So you're not actually reading the actual stories of Horus and Osiris from their source. You're getting interpretations of this where guys have gone out and said, hey, I'm going to look for 12 qualities or traits that I think I'm going to find in every religion, and I'm going to find them in every religion. So those are the guys that you're reading, or those are the guys that are quoted in movies like Zeitgeist or on websites. So what we want to actually do is go read this story for ourselves. If this meme troubles you, go to the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's online, you can read it. It was originally hieroglyphics, but now translated into English, so you can check out the story for yourself. So go back to the source. And in fact, when people do that, they tend to feel a little sheepish that they ever made this argument. The second thing that you can do after getting the whole story by reading them is to take these parallels head to head. So you'll probably see on the meme that we're encountering here, you'll see this lists of, virgin born and 12 disciples and, he died and resurrected. You'll see that. So what should you do with that? Let's take those parallels head to head and see, does that God actually have a virgin birth? So let's look at a few. How about Horus? Does Horus have a virgin birth? No, he doesn't. But even further, it depends on what Horus you're talking about from which Egyptian dynasty. Because sometimes he's the Most High God, and sometimes he's the son of Isis and Osiris. Either way, we don't get a virgin birth. So we've got a couple of different stories. Either Isis and Osiris had sex in their mother goddess's womb after falling in love as god fetuses in their mother's womb, and that's the story of Horus, who then bursts forth from Isis. The other story is that Isis she received Osiris's semen while he was dead. She flies over him in the form of a bird and receives his semen. There's Horus's virgin birth stories, right? But that one isn't even near as egregious as Mithras. Mithras is a god who his virgin birth entails jumping out of a rock next to a sacred river under a fig tree, carrying a torch in one hand and a dagger in the other. The torch illumined the underworld from which he came, and the dagger was so that he could subdue all of creation. Virgin birth, right? That's what's being said on these memes and in these lists, is that he had a virgin birth, but it's a rock. Resurrection. My favorite one is, Mithras. The problem is, Mithras never dies. If you don't die, you cannot have a resurrection. And then third, we have set everything in context. It's important that you don't take a post-resurrection, like first century Christian theology, and impose that back on something that happened 2,000 years before, or was written 2,000 years before in an entirely different culture with an entirely different worldview. The pagans, they didn't have a view of resurrection that we see from Christians. In fact, their view is that they wanted to die and go and be separated from their body and go be with the gods in the spiritual realm. That was their quote-unquote resurrection. It actually sounds a lot like the death and resurrection of Osiris, who dies and becomes king of the underworld. Okay, in Christianity, we have new heavens and new earth, which entails a new physical body. Completely different. So different that in Acts 17, when Paul is presenting he's presenting an argument for the resurrection in front of these men, these intellectuals called the Areopagus. They actually don't understand what he's saying. What are these new things that you're teaching us? It seems like Paul was preaching foreign divinities to them because they didn't understand it. These are the guys that would have known all of these deities and their quote unquote resurrection stories, right? So we have to be careful to set things in context. And when you do that, you find that these pagan gods, and they entail the worship of them and the theology that results, and then the philosophy that results, is so different. It looks nothing like the world's 3 monotheistic religions. Read the stories, take the parallels head to head, and then set everything in context. And that's how we handle this meme. So the next time someone tells you that Jesus' story is a copy of pagan myth, just ask him, what do you mean?